So I just like to lay out the structure of my presentation. So first we'll be going over what do we mean when we say LMI, going into whether something is a industry or an occupation, which seems maybe a little basic, but it's really important for the data for us to understand today. And then why do we use NAICS, SOC, and ONET codes, and how we can use them. There's a lot of data out there. Data for labor market information can come from multiple different sources. No one source is going to give you the full overview or full picture of, the labor market at a point in time. So I just wanted to include what was under labor market information and then kind of go into the one that I like the best. I think for our purposes today, the thing that works the best is data and analysis relating to employment and the workforce. And labor market information can include a wide variety of things like industry data, occupation data, population data, demographic information. But the information that we'll be going over today is going to be industry and occupation data only. But just wanted to let you know what's encompassed when the term labor market information is mentioned, and that this presentation is not meant to be an overview of all labor market information. First off, let's define a few things to know how these fit into the data. Industries are defined based on the output of the business as a whole, and occupations are defined by what an individual accomplishes on the job. Here is an example to provide a better understanding. An accountant is an occupation that can work in the healthcare industry or the financial services industry, for example. And a business in the education services industry might employ a nurse, which is an occupation, or a teacher, which is an occupation. And I know these can seem very straightforward, but you'll see why this is important in the next slide. The BLS uses a coding system to keep track of occupations and industries. And that depends whether something's an occupation or industry, it will be classified separately. So occupations are classified with Standard Occupational Classification System, or SOC, and then industries are classified with the North American Industry Classification System, or we pronounce it NAICS. First, I'll go over NAICS and then SOC and kind of how we use this information. NAICS is used by federal agencies to classify businesses into business establishments into an industry. And just to define the word establishment, that just means the physical location of a certain economic activity which produces a good or service. And establishments using similar equipment and similar labor are classified within the same industry. Essentially, it just adds consistency for defining information. And some of the information that NAICS codes can provide include the number of establishments or businesses, if you want to think of it like that, and then the number of employees in an establishment or business, and the number of jobs in an industry. And to better understand NAICS and get the most out of the information, you'll want to know how to interpret the coding or the hierarchy for it. NAICS has a hierarchy from 2 to 6 digits, with 2 being the broadest, and then 6 being the most detailed. So let me show you a few examples. So the NAICS code for construction is 23, and then that's the broadest level, and then as more digits are added, you'll see a little bit more detail. So 236, construction of buildings. And then as you go down, 2361, residential building construction. And then as you go down, the full 6 digits are added and it becomes very detailed. New single family housing construction. And you can see the progression from, just construction to construction of buildings to something very detailed as the more digits are added. And even if I didn't have the digits there, you could probably discern which is the broadest, which is the most detailed, because, new single family housing construction sounds much more detailed than just construction. And easy way I like to think of it is that the more digits, the more detailed the industry is. And I know this can seem kind of abstract, and you might be wondering, how can I use these? How do other people use them? And a few ways that people use them use NAICS codes are to use them to identify the in-demand industries, which is the presentation that I'll be giving in a couple weeks. So hopefully those will connect a little bit more. People also use NAICS codes for, sector strategies. Business attraction and expansion are usually targeted by NAICS codes because it's generally better and usually at that broader level. For example, if you work in business attraction in Arizona and you're trying to get more construction projects, it's probably better to aim towards the 23 construction rather than 236, 115 new single family housing construction. Business strategies are usually defined by NAICS codes and generally tend to be at that broader level. And then on the economic analysis side, NAICS can help us analyze job growth or declines within industries each month. So on our team, I know whether an industry is growing or declining, losing jobs, adding jobs, because the BLS reports that information by NAICS code. So I can tell based off that information, if construction lost jobs, construction gained jobs based on that information. Let me go through a few examples for you all to answer. And since, this is such a large call, I see 135 people on, the way we're going to do it is just, write it down on your own or think of the answer, and then I will go over the answer a little bit. The question is, of these three bullets, which industry is the broadest and which is the most detailed? I'll give you guys a moment to see. So your choices are 62, healthcare social assistance, 621, ambulatory healthcare services, and then 6219, other ambulatory healthcare services. And a hint, look at the NAICS code next to the titles. I'll give you guys a moment to think of that, and then we'll go over the answer. All right, so just for time here, I'm going to go over this real quickly. So here are the answers. The industry that is the broadest is going to be that healthcare and social assistance. 6-2, you can tell because it's only 2 digits, which means it's the broadest. And then the most detailed is the 4-digit that's available, other ambulatory healthcare services. And kind of like I said earlier, even if I took those codes away, you could probably see which are the most detailed just based off the titles as well. Those are the answers there. And a question I'm going to pose and then answer, why would you be more interested in a more specific category? So I went over a few slides ago why someone would be interested, for business expansion attraction, that broader level. On the flip side, I think why somebody, especially on the business services side, would be interested in a more detailed information is to get a better understanding of the business and to understand kind of where the business fits in within the broader sector. Moving on from NAICS to SOC codes. SOC codes are 6-digit codes used by the BLS to classify workers into occupational categories for data collection. In each of these groups, the information, some of the information that SOC provides that we'll be talking about are hourly and annual wage information by job type, and then the number of people employed by job type. Similar to NAICS codes, occupations that use similar skills are classified into the same occupational group. So ultimately, this results in 23 major groups, so very broad, and then drills down to 97 minor groups, and then 461 broader occupations until we ultimately have 840 detailed occupations. The way I like to think of it is the more unique digits, the more detail. The 23 major groups, it's not helpful, or I don't expect anybody to memorize that. I just wanted to provide more detail on kind of how detailed this can get. So I will show you an example of what I mean. So for the structure, the broadest group, all of these are going to have 6 digits. So you can see at the top here, 31-40s, healthcare support occupations. The multiple zeros after that dash tell you that this category is broad. And then as you go down, you'll see that a 9 is added to those zeros, so 31-930s, other healthcare support occupations, and then a few more digits are added until ultimately you reach 6 unique digits. chance, and that'll be an occupation that you likely recognize looking at the name. Here's another representation of that example, if you're a little more visual like me. Looking at the structure, so you'll see that healthcare support 31-40 encompasses all of the information here, and then it kind of drills down and gets more specific as digits are added. So 31-9, 31-9090 until you result in that 6-digit level of specificity with an occupation that you would likely recognize. So you might be wondering, similarly, why are SOC codes used? And they're used for similar purposes as NAICS to disseminate and collect data. And SOC codes are used for various purposes to find out wages for an occupation. Generally, people want to know the wages, what people usually want, the information at that 6-digit UD code level for the occupation. That information can help with businesses setting salary scales. So for example, if a business or a dental office was opening and they're wondering, hey, what is about the median wage for dental assistants in the area, then they can look at the SOC code and look at, the 50th percentile wage and take a look at that. And then it can also help job seekers with similar questions and, students looking for, how many people are in this occupation in this area, what's the average wage, that can be very helpful. Also for similar purposes for VR career counselors, if they want to know, want to help a client with, what the average wage they should expect within an occupation should be, then they can tell through that. And then it's also helpful for like salary negotiations for employers, employees. If you know what the average wage is, then, you can argue something, in your favor. And then it's also helpful for, I think the best way that it can be used is that SOC codes are specific to each area. So there are SOC codes for a dental assistant in Arizona. SOC code that shows the data for a dental assistant in Yuma or Phoenix MSA or Metro Statistical Area. It's really great for accounting for regional differences in pay. Usually from area to area, state to state, there will be differences in pay. So SOC codes provide that specificity and help compare across areas and account for those differences. You might be wondering, what about ONET codes? How do they fit into this? I haven't talked about it yet, and like Terrell said to begin with, I know a lot of people on this call are a little bit more already familiar with that. So the way that I like to think of ONET codes is just that they are SOC codes with a lot more information that's more applicable to more situations. So I saw this on the ONET website. I was going to kind of write out on a slide the information that's available for ONET, but I thought this just summarized it really well, but some of the information that is available. And really shows the additional information that ONET can provide to job seekers and people just looking beyond what would this occupation be categorized as, what's the wage, how many accountants are in Arizona. It provides a lot more detail on kind of what someone would be doing on the job, the skills required, the activities they would do in that job, things like that. So really goes into more of what the job encompasses. And I think this infographic really highlights how it can be very useful to clients. I also saved, and in addition to that, so see it has labor market information. So usually ONET will pull from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for a lot of the like wage information, Outlook information, things like that. So that's just a small part of ONET, and then all of this extra stuff that is here. I also saved ONET codes for the end because now that I went over SOC codes, you know the structure of ONET codes essentially. So the way I like to think of ONET codes is just ONET codes are SOC codes with additional detail. SOC codes with additional digits for occupational detail. That's the way I like to look at it. So SOC codes that even are the most detailed, those unique 6 digits, for example, like our dental assistant example, what ONET will do is that they'll add on additional 2 digits, so there will be 8, and provide additional detail if available. some SOC codes, even though they are, that 6-digit level, are still arguably broad. So this is where ONET can come in and provide that additional detail. I'll show you a few examples, so hopefully this makes a little bit more sense, but just to show the difference between how many occupations are available for SOC, there's over 800 occupations for SOC, and then over 1,000 for ONET, so just providing that additional detail for some of those occupations that are arguably a little broad. Taking a look here, I'll give you a few examples. The SOC code for dental assistants. You'll see SOC code 31-9091, and then the ONET code is going to be 31-9091, period, 2 zeros. So those 2 zeros note that additional detail is not available on ONET. They didn't choose to break out that occupation any further, but there will still be a full profile and all of that amazing information that ONET provides. It just won't be any more detailed beyond just dental assistant. On the flip side, something like registered nurses, which is arguably pretty broad. I mean, there's so many different types of nurses, 29-1141. So ONET goes and breaks this out even further to define acute care nurses, critical care nurses, just a lot of different information to fill in that additional detail beyond just registered nurse. So essentially, if you see those last 2 digits as anything other than just 00, then that will note that there's additional detail that ONET provides. And for a lot of occupations, that's not true. It'll just be the .00, and they won't provide additional detail, but they'll have a full profile for it. Just to provide a few reminders and examples of how they're similar, how they're different. So SOC codes have 6 digits, and then ONET has those additional 2 digits, which make it 8 digits. And ONET provides, like I said, a lot more detail on occupations if available. So this is another example where ONET provides additional detail. So the SOC code for financial specialists, all other, pretty broad, is 13-2099. So ONET has seen that they can provide additional detail on that. So they will go 13-2099.01 financial quantitative analyst to provide that detailed information on, worker attributes and kind of what one would be doing within that occupation. And then as I wrap up here and just provide a few reminders before I go into a few more examples. So NAICS codes, I know we talked about those way at the beginning, they provide information on industries, and the coding ranges from 2 to 6 digits, with 6 digits being the most detailed, 2 digits being the broadest. SOC codes are for occupations. They will have a 6-digit code with a dash after the first 2 digits. And then ONET codes will be the same as SOC codes with 2 additional digits. So the 2 digits, dash, period, 2 additional digits if available. All right, so I'm going to go into a few examples. And again, like I said, since we are so big, then just go ahead and I'll give you a few moments to write it down on your end. And then we'll go over the answers. So these are all A, B, C, D. So which of these examples is an occupation or occupation category, meaning the broadest? And then which is an industry? So these are all going to be an occupation, a broad occupation category, or an industry. So I'll give you all a few moments to think of that. All right, so I'll go ahead and go over the answers a little bit. So A is going to be an industry, and some of the ways that you can know that is, and you can tell by the title, finance and insurance, sounds like an industry, only 2 digits, must be the broadest industry. So that would be an industry. Then for B, 13-2011, so that's a 6-digit code with a dash, and it's unique digits. So that's going to be an occupation. And C, so it has 6 digits with the dash plus a bunch of zeros after. So if you remember from our broadest occupation example, that's going to be a high-level occupation category. If you think of that Venn diagram I had, that was right at the top of it. So that's an occupation category that's broad. And then 4 digits, 6214. NAICS codes range from 2 to 6 digits. 4-digit, you can kind of tell that it's just off the name, that it is a occupation, not occupation, an industry. Outpatient care centers is going to be an industry. And then I sent these over to our wonderful organizers. So I put together a few resources like the ONET SOC crosswalk, ONET Home, and then just a few resources that I think are very helpful as you continue in your work. So with that, I will go to questions.